Hello everybody, this is Manu and welcome to another Eternal Brews video. Been a while since I made an Eternal Brews video, but new set, new opportunities for spicy and cool brews, and I got a particularly cool and spicy brew for you today. It's called Sentinel Aggro, and it's a different take on what you can do with the new Explorer Sentinel Praxis stuff going on that goes into a more aggressive direction. I played it already a bunch on a recent stream, so people that saw it there, you know what I'm talking about. And for the rest, see for yourselves now. Here is the deck. People have already asking during the stream if I'm gonna do a deck tech on it, and I figured sure, why not? It's a pretty cool and kind of interesting and different type of deck, and one that's also not super obvious and that I haven't seen anyone else messing around with. So let's take a look. This is basically a more medium-sized aggressive deck. It's banking a bit more on powerful individual cards and tempo rather than just hyper-aggressively curving out with a low curve. Like size-wise, this can be compared to Old Burn or Old Burn Queen rather, and just a tad bit slower since it has less aggressive 1-drop, 2-drop curve thing, but much heavier hitting later units. Alright, so let's talk about the units. First we have the Explorer early game for Prospector, for Oni Cavediver, for Spelunker, and for Raider. Prospector is super powerful if you can enable him. The deck has 3 1-drop relics and 4 2-drop relics to enable him right away the turn after you play him, if you play him on curve on turn 1. And then 4 more dig side to enable him a turn later on turn 3. So even if you enable him on turn 3, he quickly becomes on par or slightly better than cards like Pyro Knight. Not quite as good as Oni Ronin probably if you activate him on turn 3. If you activate him on turn 2, you can definitely argue that he's better than Oni Ronin. And yeah, also he has endurance, so he buys you some time pretty well while already getting some damage in and gives you more time to set up, which is great. The Hourglass is a bit awkward with the Prospector in the sense that it doesn't do anything for Prospector other than buff it, but the Hourglass endurance has some other upsides with the deck, and if you care about relics, then Hourglass becomes good enough to include as a one-off, but I'll talk about that later. Then we have Oni Cavediver. This is the 2-drop of the deck. I couldn't really fit or find any other 2-drop that was quite good enough to make it. The card is usually a 4/2 for 2, which is pretty good. Like if you can get in with her, she's hits pretty hard. The 2 health means she still trades with a lot, so she's not quite as good as, say, an Argenport Instigator. But the ultimate of paying 2 to scout actually comes up a fair share, so once you get some spare time, you can manipulate your draw step a bit, make sure you don't flood, or try to find that card that helps you end the game or pull ahead or something. So it's actually a neat upside that comes up a fair share. I've liked it surprisingly much. Then we have the Seasoned Spelunker. It's mostly just a 3-cost 4/4, which is far from bad. The ultimate rarely ever comes up in this deck. 5 is a lot in a deck like this for something that has no meaningful impact. By the time you ultimate, you usually have a relic already, and ramping from, say, 5 to 6 or 7 doesn't really do anything for the deck. So you can basically ignore the ultimate. But being a 3-cost 4/4 and an Explorer for dig side triggers is basically all what he's about, and that's good enough. And then we have Temple Raider, another conditional 3-cost 4/4. In this case we also get Charge. This card is really, really nice. A fair share of the time you can afford to just play it on 3, hit them for 2, then play a 4-drop Sentinel and hit them for 4 again. And sometimes you just have something else to do on turn 3, like a dig side or a Spelunker or whatever, or depleted power source and something cheap. And then you can just use that later to gain momentum, like after your 4-drop Sentinel on turn 5, you can just go Temple Raider plus say a torch or something, and hit them hard and fast out of nowhere. Then we have the Sentinel mid-game, top of the curve for Monolith Guardian, 4 Sandstorm Titan, and 3 Arcanum Monitor, and for the real tempo plays, Tempered Sentinel. Monolith Guardian, super powerful, the deck is pretty good at enabling it. Turn 2 Power Stone into turn 3 Monolith Guardian, for example, is a pretty strong curve, providing you with a 7/7 that doesn't die to Annihilate by turn 3. The main issue with the card is that if you don't have a relic, it's a dead card, and if they silence it, it's basically dead. So it's sort of like the kind of card that just dies to silence, which is a bit awkward, but the upside is pretty big. Like if you're not facing silences, the card is super strong and really obnoxious for opponents. And it's also worth noting that the Power Stone into Monolith Guardian also enables you to turn 3 drop a Tempered Sentinel as well and hit them for 5, which is a pretty strong and explosive curve, especially on the play. And if you imagine that draw with like a turn 1 torch on one of their early plays, like on their turn 1 play, or a lucky Prospector, then you get the idea. Then we have Sandstorm Titan. I mean, it's the biggest 4-cost Sentinel and one of the biggest cheap Sentinels in the game. The endurance is nice for offense-defense. It helps the deck with flyers, which it can be a bit soft to if the opponent gets a race on you. And also the endurance and the higher attack than its actual cost makes it a really good way to cheat Tempered Sentinel in play. For example, on turn 5 you can often drop a Titan and use it to bond a Tempered Sentinel without losing anything, and then you basically effectively get a Tempered Sentinel for 5 power and don't even skip on a block with the Titan. So you basically get like a free Titan or a 1-cost Tempered Sentinel, depending on how you look at it. And then last but not least, we have Arcanum Monitor. Just another Sentinel, triggers Dig Side for the Explorers, which is nice. Since the deck has no tricks, like for example Burnt Queen has with Rapid Shot, it definitely needs to make sure that it doesn't get stalled out too hard and that it can push through, and Titan on Titan stalls are quite legendary, and Arcanum Monitor breaks Titan on Titan stalls. With the Dig Side out, playing an Arcanum Monitor means all your Explorers get +2/+2, turning your 1-drop Prospectors into 5/5s and your 3-drops into 6/6s, and even your Cavediver into a 6/4, means it doesn't trade with all the random 3 attack units anymore, and forces the opponent to trade with something big like a Titan, which is really good. And yeah, I mean, it can also sometimes be big enough or be a relevant Sentinel to bond out a Tempered Sentinel if it comes to that. This is sort of like the Soulfire Drake slot in a way. Not 100% sure what the right number is, but 3 felt pretty good, because drawing multiples or drawing them too early can be awkward, but having one most of the time seems nice, since the deck sometimes otherwise can have issues pushing through and get stalled out, and if it gets stalled out for a couple turns, the hopes of winning diminish drastically. And yeah, Tempered Sentinel, just a great power play. The charge, the bond, makes it allows you to explode on the board and immediately hit the opponent. Even if you skip an attack, you don't really skip an attack, because the Sentinel does the attack instead at least. And sometimes you even get to play it without skipping an attack, like I said, with Monolith Guardian or a turn 5 Sandstorm Titan. Yeah, then we are on to the relics. We have 2 Family Charter, 1 Infinite Hourglass for Power Stone and for Dig Side. Family Charter, nothing too special, but it's a cheap relic, which is super important for Prospector, Cavediver and Spelunker, turning them all on reliably. Like, there will be draws where you won't have the time to play a Power Stone turn 2, or you just don't have a Power Stone, and Dig Side forces you to delay Spelunker a turn or play it as a 3/3 on turn 3, which makes it die to Torch and stuff, which is something you might not want. So having enough stuff that you can play on curve early on to set up your 1/3 drop relic synergy guys is pretty big. Similar for Monolith Guardian. And the Scout has some has some usefulness, and there will also sometimes be games that become a bit more grindy or stally, and then being able to later throw this away when you already found another relic to keep your relic synergies up and draw a card. That's one of the few uses of the Spelunker's ultimate. You can on 5 ultimate to gain to 6, then at 6 draw 2 cards in like aggro and aggro stalls and stuff like that. It's a fringe thing, but it comes up sometimes. I've drawn my fair share of cards with these family charters in some games, and some of those games were not hopeless either. Then we have the 1 Hourglass. It enables Prospector, even though the endurance is redundant there with Prospector and Titan, making it a bit awkward, but I think it's a bit better than another charter, since the endurance still does a lot for some of the other cards, like the 3-drop Explorers, the Monolith Guardian, and the Tempered Sentinel, and also for the Tempered Sentinel bonding and stuff. So I figured 1 Hourglass is a bit better than the 3rd charter, but feel free to disagree. I mean, it's a close call. I just think the deck benefits a bit from the offense-defense potential of Hourglass, and also the additional help against permafrost and stuff like that. Or like Cinder Yeti. Then we have the 4 Power Stone. They are sort of like the favors of the deck in a way. That's why the deck is like 25 plus 4 Power Stone to have like 29-ish power. Except that unlike the favors that effectively only cost 1 power, this always costs 2, because it doesn't give you the power this turn, it gives it to you the next. But instead of other favor a marginal utility, this accelerates you if you have sufficient power drops in addition. So this lets you ramp into a turn 3 7/7 Monolith Guardian or a turn 3 Titan, which are both super powerful curve plays. Like Prospector into Power Stone into a 4-drop is one of the super powerful curves. The deck has a lot of powerful curve lineups. A lot of them start with Prospector, but not all of them. And yeah, the other thing is, obviously, it's a relic for the relic synergies, which is very important, and it's a cheap one at that curves well into Spelunker, into Monolith Guardian, and Prospector into Power Stone. And then we have 4 Digside. That's a card that I have been messing around a bit with numbers between 3 and 4. Currently I like 4. It's a relic for the relic synergies. Turn 2 Cavediver, turn 3 Digside, bounce their biggest guy, hit them for 4 is a decent curve. Then turn 4, you get to play a Sentinel, turn your Cavediver into a 5/3, attack again, and so on. And there are also these Sentinel plus Bond Tempered Sentinel curves where you get +2/+2 to all your Explorers, suddenly turning your 4/4s into 5/5s or 6/6. 6s, letting them attack into a lot more units. Like as 6/6s they can attack into almost everything. And the tempo is really nice. Most of the time you're just gonna return units, not relics. There will be very few corner cases maybe where you bounce like an opposing Power Stone because they don't have a unit, or it's the best thing you can do to just slow them down a bit and you just want to develop your relic. But usually you're just gonna sit on this if you can afford to use it to bounce like an expensive big guy that keeps you from attacking to allow you to crush in again. And it's sort of like a bit of the annihilate, vanquish type kind of role, as well as relic synergies, and making your early game units benefit from your later game unit drops with the Explorer buff. The Explorer buffing has been surprisingly good, much better than I assumed when I saw the relic during, say, the set review. Okay, that leaves us with the spells, which is basically just 4 Torch and 4 Obliterate. The best and only removal and burn available in this color combination. It's ways to deal with units that keep you from attacking or threaten to trade with your high attack, low health units like Cavediver or Tempered Sentinel, and also allow you to finish off the opponent after you hit them hard and fast earlier on. And regarding the curves, there's a lot of cool curves, like imagine turn 1 Relic, turn 2 Cavediver, turn 3 one of the 3-drop Explorers, and then a Guardian or a Titan the turn after, or I don't know, 1-drop Relic, Cavediver, Digside into a Sentinel, or Prospector into Power Stone into one of the 4-drop Sentinels, or Prospector into Cavediver into Decklist, hit them for 7, drop a 4-drop Sentinel, hit them for another 9, and so on. So there's a lot of really cool and powerful curve sequences this deck has that give you a lot of power very early and hit the opponent really hard. The power base is a bit tricky. I only have 9 Sigils right now because I decided to try and run 4 Crests, given that we only have 4 actual 1-drops, which are not always even that great on turn 1, so sometimes playing them on 2 is totally fine. And the Crest just help you fix the colors so you reliably have double time and double fire early on, because if you play a Monolith Guardian turn 3, have a Tempered Sentinel in hand, but can't bond the Sentinel because you only have 1 fire, it's going to be really disappointing and cost you a lot of explosiveness. So the deck deceptively wants double fire as early as turn 3 sometimes. So I wanted to make sure of that. And yeah, the seals are just additional virtual red sources, as well as helping you with more frequently getting your turn 1 Prospector out. And yeah, the seeds are at their worst in this deck with the 9 sigils, but given how the deck curves out, there will be a fair share of draws where you can just play it depleted turn 1, for example. So the power base is not ideal, but it's fine. And yeah, talking about some cards that I didn't include at the end, I think more family charters were just worse than more real cards and additional dig sites, so I didn't really include them. More Hourglass. Hourglass is really just almost always a one-off because drawing the second is super bad, and the synergies and utility from an Hourglass is not strong enough usually to yeah, kind of have a huge impact on the game when you draw it. But so when you don't draw it, it's not a big deal. When you draw it, it's nice, but when you draw 2, it's devastating. And another card that I tried and or considered was Sauropod Wrangler, partially for the Titan into Tempered Sentinel curve. Like you can go turn 2 Sauropod Wrangler, turn 3 Titan, bond Tempered Sentinel, because Titan costs 3 and Sentinel costs 5, so Titan bonds the Sentinel right away, so that's pretty cool. The problem I think is a bit that Wrangler as a 2/2 doesn't attack well into most things. Like it doesn't even attack into Instigators and stuff like that. There's a lot of 3 health units that immediately shut it down. So then it would need like an Arcanum Monitor or a Decklist to even keep attacking, and then it still trades with like everything, like random 1-drops and stuff. So it's a bit underwhelming. And also it doesn't accelerate into a lot of cards, mostly Monolith Guardian and Titan, and for a turn 3 Monolith Guardian with a Sauropod Wrangler, you would need one of the 3 1-cost relics, so it's also not that likely. And yeah, the Sentinel, the Tempered Sentinel only matters for cost reduction really with a Sandstorm Titan. So it's a very, very flimsy and marginal impact, and Arcanum Monitor will almost never be big enough in your hand to be reduced by Sauropod Wrangler, at least not before you have 5 power anyway, normally. And yeah, it would be nice to have an additional Explorer for the Decklist curve to go like turn 1 and or turn 2 Explorer, turn 3 Decklist, turn 4 Sentinel, hit them hard, but Sauropod Wrangler is just not quite good enough. I had like 2 Explorers for a bit, 2 Wranglers for a bit over like a Decklist and a Monitor, but I think ultimately more Decklist and Monitor are better to help the deck be better at pushing and also have a bit better relic synergies basically, and avoid getting stalled out. The other Explorer that I considered was Oasis Seeker, since it's a 3/2 and an Explorer. The 3 attack means it attacks fairly well, at least doesn't get stalled by all the 3 health units, and with Decklist even turns into a 4/3, attacking into a couple of more units even and hitting even harder. But the problem is I just can't really fit it. I can't find 4 other cards that I like less to fit the Oasis Seekers, and I think running like 2 Aces Seekers is kind of random and inconsequent, and they're not that good. I think either you want 4 of them to curve out harder and more consistently, or you don't want them at all. If you just add 2 more, you're not going to curve out that much better, but you also have the issue of drawing them later when they kind of suck. Like drawing Cavediver later is much better. You can still ultimate to Scry, and you also have a 4 attack unit that attacks into a lot more or trades with a lot more on defense. So yeah, Digside and Arcane Monitor have just more utility and impact for the deck in the end. And to be fair, Burn Green has survived the longest time with like 4 Instigators as their only 2-drops too. And this deck curves out bigger and hits harder than Burn in terms of unit size and unit strength anyway. So yeah, I think that's kind of all I really considered. There's not that many options. The 4-cost Sentinel Relic that deals 3 damage is just way too expensive for the deal 3. Digside is cheaper and deals with bigger units temporarily, and also the temporary +1/+1 to all explorers is much better than the permanent +2 to Sentinels, especially given that turn 4 is the turn where you want to drop your Sentinels, so it really doesn't do anything. The one other card that is kind of cool that I could see playing if I could fit it would be Displacer, especially with the Digsides having 8 bounce effects to kind of just constantly set back the opponent is really cool. Maybe there's a possibility that Displacer is better than Obliterate, but I doubt it, and there's not really any other way I can see fitting Displacers. Maybe it's worth trying to cut a Digside and a Monitor for 2 Displacers or something, but there's already 8 4-drops, but and Monitor has a bit of a different, more unique effect. So I'm not quite sure also Monitor triggers Digside, while Displacer has no other synergies with the deck. But yeah, those are the cards that I had in mind, have in the back of my head, so feel free to like mess around with them if you want. And that's it for the deck list. This is the Sentinel Aggro that I've been messing around with. It's really cool and really fun. It's a brew after all, so it's not gonna be the next big thing, but it can hold its own, and it is fairly functional and powerful and fun to play. It's just not the strongest and most reliable deck in the end. But yeah, it's something a little different that shows off what you can do with some of the new cards and new mechanics and synergies that they have been putting out. So it definitely seemed worth sharing with you, especially with all the people out there that are looking for something a bit cool and different and spicy from the usual stuff, and or just enjoy themselves some Explorers and or Sentinels, for example. Alright, as usual, gonna hop into some games, show the deck in action, to see how it actually plays out and how it does in the real world, and get a sneak peek at how it plays out, especially for the people that might not have all the cards to try it out themselves right away. Okay, so stay tuned for the first game coming up next.